to, oh, could hear before, now I'm muted. Oh no, now people can't hear. I'm not sure why. You won't have to listen to me the whole time. I'm just gonna be your moderator. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Care Compass Network Regional Trauma-Informed Care Team's first annual Partnering for a Resilient Community Virtual Learning Symposium. Thank you so much for joining us for the Self-Care and Professional Boundaries Workshop. My name is Tracy Lyman, and hopefully you can all hear me okay now. I'm a lecturer for teaching, learning, and educational leadership at Binghamton University, and I'll be your moderator this morning. I'm also a proud member of the Care Compass Network Regional Trauma-Informed Care Network team, which started in April 2019. Our team consists of dedicated and passionate individuals from colleges, county government, healthcare, social work, human services, and schools spanning the Care Compass Network 9-county region in the Southern Tier and beyond. Our team envisions a resilient community built upon strong partnerships, trust, and compassion. Our mission is to implement evidence-based trauma-informed care by supporting the development of resilient and strong partnerships, by helping families, individuals, and communities through advocacy, education, and empowerment. A core strategy to bring this to fruition is to create and promote access, availability, and training, educational tools, and resources to our community. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We are recording this presentation today for quality assurance purposes, and we will upload this to the Care Compass Network website. You'll get an email with that link. And the PowerPoint slides will be posted as well for this presentation. We will have the last 10 minutes will be for Q&A, but if you have questions as we go throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We're all using it already, so that's great. We know how to find it and use it, so that'll be wonderful. Please feel free, and we'll hopefully get to as many questions as possible at the end. I'd like to now introduce our presenter. Kathryn Simons is a licensed clinical social worker at the Greater Binghamton Health Center. Kathryn has over 15 years of social work experience in child protection services, case management, CPEP as a CPEP evaluator, and as a pre-release coordinator for inmates who were seriously mentally ill at the Elmira Correctional Facility. In her role, Kathryn has dedicated her time working with and supporting teenagers and families in our local communities. A passion of Kathryn's is educating and conducting professional development at schools to help with the impact of childhood trauma and adversity, and help with social behaviors, academic, behavioral health, and overall well-being. She's a supporter of building positive, healthy relationships and mentorships with children, families, and individuals to build resilience and heal from adversity. Kathryn encourages the practice of self-care and professional boundaries for all individuals, parents, and professionals. A strong trauma-informed community begins with caregivers and professionals learning to care for themselves and each other when faced with this challenging work. Kathryn is part of our 24-member Care Compass Regional Team, Trauma-Informed Care Team, and is tasked with increasing the awareness of ACEs in our community, trauma, toxic stress, and its impacts on families, children, the workforce, and our whole community. So please welcome Kathryn. Take it away.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. We good? Okay. So I am doing this presentation as someone who is deeply concerned about and passionate, I guess, about what's going on in all of our lives right now, especially, and how it's impacting how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about the jobs that we do, and what we're doing to help ourselves and each other kind of get through this and maintain somewhat of a positive attitude. And, the primary thing is to identify some warning signs and some risk factors that you could be approaching a place that is difficult to get out of. And so to kind of help you identify different things that you can look for as warning signs, and also some things you can do to prevent problems from getting worse, or to prevent problems from happening, hopefully to the point where you can't manage them. So the first objective will be to define what secondary traumatic stress is and the related disorders, identify risk factors and warning signs for STS, develop a self-care routine individually and with agencies, schools, and wherever it is that you work, describe a proactive plan, using boundaries and intellect to balance empathy, list examples of healthy boundaries, and use skills to manage emotions in the moment. So the risks of caring, and it doesn't really matter what you do, if you're, a human being who does something where you interact with families, your own family, people in the community, patients, pupils, whatever, there's always going to be this risk. So if you're giving your everything, if you're doing your best and you really want to make a difference or help, there's risks that come with that. And that some of these risks are the secondary traumatic stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue. One thing I like to note here is that this is a very personal presentation for me, because I have experienced, I would say, somewhere between burnout and compassion fatigue, or both of them, in the last couple of years. And it was really hard for me. And I would love to say to you all, like, I came out the other side, like I'm all good, but the reality is, that I don't have that. I can't tell you that, really. This is sort of, this is just, I'm doing the best I can, and I want you to know that I use all of the things that I talked about in this, and that they have been helpful. Hold on one second. So can you guys see? Hold on, it looks like. How's that?
No, that's the,
No?
now, yes, now it's changing for me. Okay, now I see your objective.
Okay, all right.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
you guys can see the objectives now. Sorry. All right. So again, this is deeply personal. This is something that I'm still struggling with, and I find myself thinking like, oh, I've got through this, I've done it, I'm better. And then something else happens, and I'm kind of like, oh. So I'm not preaching to you. I'm not coming from a place where I am not completely understanding. Also, I want to tell you that when I first heard about, obviously we all hear about burnout and compassion fatigue and, the risks of caring, but also when I really first, I went to a presentation that a psychologist student gave at the facility where I work, Greater Binghamton, and I remember hearing her describe burnout and, what it looks like and the risk factors and how it impacts people. And I had my fingernails digging into my palms to try to stop myself from crying, because very clearly I was there, probably over the edge a little bit. And I don't know about you guys, but when I hear burnout, I think someone did something wrong. That was the first thing I thought, like, I've done something wrong. Like, I know that, you're told don't get burnt out, like, pay attention. And then I found myself, squarely in the midst of I call it a burning, blazing, brilliant burnout. It was, really impacted everything. So my goal and my hope with this primarily is to normalize this for you, and just sort of say, like, if, especially now during this crazy world where we live and all the things that are happening around us, if you're not feeling some of these things, like, I would ask that you pay attention and dig a little deeper, because the last thing you want to do is kind of shove it down until it boils over. So, okay. So what is stress? So as defined in the article, The Hidden Cost of Empathy, stress is a mentally or emotionally disruptive or disquieting influence which can arise from positive or negative events. Stress emerges over time. Each new stress builds on the unresolved past stress, compounding the effect of additional stress. So there are different kinds of stresses in our lives. Like, there's healthy stress, motivating stress, things that help us, finish a task or get things done in a way that is productive and is healthy. So you think of athletes that have to run a race, or basketball players who have to perform at their best, and they have adrenaline that pushes them through and helps them get to the place of performance where they need to be. And then with toxic stress, I think often that's associated with children who are overwhelmed with the stress of being exposed to things at home or in their lives that are overwhelming to their systems, and then that can cause ingrained stress responses. And then if it's doubly impactful if the kids don't have people in their lives that can help them. But a lot of us are people who have gone through these kind of traumas and have had these kind of toxic stress is in our lives growing up. And so, you know, our responses and how we process stress and what we do in response to stressful situations were often shaped when we were younger. And I think that the motivation for me in getting involved with this amazing network was not just to educate about how we can help children, but also how we can help ourselves, because I really believe knowing is the first step. And then if you know, you can do something about that. But when you're in stressful work environments, or when you have face-to-face interactions with people struggling, or who maybe have reactions that are disproportionate to what's going on, we all have our own struggles responding to that in ways that are healthy and adaptive, and to make things okay instead of sometimes feeling like they've gotten out of control. So the stress that motivates you, how you deal with that, that's shaped based off of a lot of what's happened in your life and what you're able to do to process it as an adult. So the traumatic express, like I said, it's an impact on overall well-being resulting from exposure to shocking, emotionally overwhelming situations that may involve actual or threatened death, serious injury, or threat to physical integrity. So we're not talking about I got a ton of work to do and kids to feed, and I still want to be able to go and watch my favorite TV show tonight. Like, yes, that's stressful. You have to get these things done, but that's not necessarily the traumatic stress we're talking about. So anything you have in your life or at work that is shocking and emotionally overwhelming is that is the impact it's going to have on how you are able to process what's happening, to process your work responsibilities, and effectively work with the people with whom you're offering whatever service you're trying to help them. So the dictionary definition of trauma is a very difficult or unpleasant experience that causes someone to have mental or emotional problems, usually for a long time. Medical is a serious injury to a person's body. And I think typically we think of traumas as physical, sexual, emotional abuse, neglect. We have in our community, the flood was very traumatic for people. And I know, even though I wasn't directly impacted by it, I know when I smell, like after it's rained, and if I smell any like sort of musty things, I kind of like, I do have like a feeling that comes with that of sort of like dread, like, oh, I don't like that smell. And that's really minor, because other people will have reminders of trauma through other innocuous things in their environment or life. So, one person's trauma may not be another's, but it's just how well you're able to cope with it and whether or not it has an impact on how you're feeling and how you're able to process stress and respond. Vicarious trauma is leftover emotions from hearing the stories or witnessing the pain, fear, or terror that comes from exposure to trauma. Limited supports can lead to unrecognized warning signs that then may lead to problems with relationships and emotional and physical health. So vicarious trauma is essentially being told things by people around you that has happened to them. And then you have this incredible overwhelm sometimes that comes with that. And I think everybody here can remember a time where they heard something from a student or someone who's in front of you that can't pay a bill or is struggling with their own kids or their own problems in their lives. And what they're telling you can be very overwhelming, and especially with the pressure or that feeling like you have to do something or that you want to do something. We just are trying to really process that and figure out ways that what are we going to be doing to help ourselves while we hear these traumatic stories. So it's indirect exposure. There's also like counselors and therapists, social workers, police officers, doctors, and lawyers could be at risk of vicarious trauma. So any person who has a significant relationship with a survivor of trauma may also come to have these secondary traumatization. And that's important to pay attention to, because if it's your husband or your child or your mother or father who are having these things happen to them, that's still impacting your responses. So burnout, and this was, I wanted to make sure I was paying attention to when I thought I had burnout, that there were actually other factors involved in this. But, it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And it occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands. And then there is a bathtub model that is used by people as a symbol for how we handle things. So our ability to get things done. And it's what supports do we need from other, what self-care do we get? And then you fill all the tub up with that. So you have really good supervision, you have a community of people you can rely on, you've got a good team. And then you do what you have to do to take care of yourself, and you have the things you need to get through the day without being impacted directly or indirectly by the situations and experiences of other people. And then the demands that we allow to be sort of placed on us, and feeling like, I always say, like, I'm coloring outside the lines and it's draining my tub, So like, if I don't stay at least somewhat in between the lines of what my place is and what I know is my job and what I can and cannot do, that is really something that I find that takes away from the supports, because the supports are all telling me to color in the lines. And then if I kind of go out rogue, then they're less likely to support me in the future, because what they're seeing is that I'm not, people are busy and they're giving me advice and help, and I'm just disregarding that and going off on my own. Then in the future, I'm gonna, they're gonna have less patience maybe. So I really have to pay attention to that, because I know I need to keep my bathtub full, or else I'm not going to be able to, do this, and have in fact been in that place. And then the other part of burnout is caused by what you want to get done, the expectations you have for yourself, and what actually can happen. And so if you're not able to celebrate your successes, whether it's small or big, then you'll end up focused on the person or the individual or the whatever it was that you couldn't help. And then I think anybody here can imagine that if you're only able to look at the things you can't do, that's going to be very draining, and it's going to make it so that, like, you're not going to really enjoy going to work. You're going to feel as though it's pointless. And because, more often than not, especially in the field of social work, there's less big results, like there's less stories of like getting through something and being successful, because we have such limited resources and an ability to help, other than when we're face to face sometimes with people. And so it's just taking those little victories and trying to focus on them and putting them at the forefront of your mind, so that you can draw from that when things don't go well. And a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about later, I think, will help with that. Burnout, so it's exhaustion and then cynicism. Like, this is, what's the point in this? Like, every day I come to work and I have the same situation, and it's just really difficult, and I can't do this because I don't have enough services or help or support. So there's not enough anything right now to make this better. It's really a gateway to that secondary traumatic stress, because at this point, you kind of maybe, like I always say, like, you kind of have like the efforts a little bit. So you're like, what's the point? I don't really care. And then your guard is down, and you're more susceptible to really being impacted by the things that are out of your control, especially if you feel like everything is out of your control. And the fatigue that comes from burnout is sort of a special kind of exhaustion. It has to do with feeling like you have to be there for people all of the time, and whether or not that's effective or you feel like that's impactful. And so what that brings us to is compassion fatigue. And I want to make a note that this lady, I'm not condoning smoking, but I felt like this was really like the meh. Instead of the F, you're like meh, like, what's the point? And this is the condition characterized by an emotional and physical exhaustion. And it's really like, it affects our ability to empathize or feel compassion, because we're just, like, our garbage disposals are full, like they're backed up, there's no room. And I've said this, like, I have no more room for another sad story. I have no more room for another kid that comes through my door and there's nothing I can do to help. I have no more room for this. And so like this is the time when you see the disengaged people. And so when you call someone and you're expecting to sort of get this help, and they're like, meh, like, I don't really want to help, like, I'm just going to do I'm just coming to work, working 8 to 4:30, doing what I have to do. And then I'm going home and I'm not worrying about anything else. And sometimes you may be on the phone and you really need that person to maybe go the extra mile. And then depending on your own experiences and how well you're processing stress, your response then will either further cause that person to withdraw, get mad, yell at you, be rude, And then then this could add to your own, difficulties. And I think about like this story where I called a school about a kid, and there was a miscommunication between the programs. And so when the principal called me back to say, like, we've started transportation for a kid that hadn't been admitted to the program, I was like, I don't have that child. I don't know who you're talking about. And I was confused and upset with the other program who hadn't communicated with me, not with the principal. But my staff had called the principal back, and she was like, I've never been spoken to like that. That woman was so rude. My staff was kind of like, that's not like Kathryn. So I called her back and I said, I'm really sorry. Like, I did not mean to come off that way. That's not at all my intent. I know you're working really hard to get this kid's needs met. And if I hadn't, that may have led her to think of, like, this person's supposed to be running this program, and there's no point in, like, why bother calling, because this is, like, I don't want to be talked to like that. And so being patient with people who pick up the phone and you can clearly hear that they have the meh, or they're just meh, or they're angry, or they're just rigid, and like the fact that they're not gonna, that there's nothing they can do to help you, or they don't want to help, or they're not helping, to have some compassion for them too, and to sort of recognize that this person may have been just really, they don't have any more room, that they're dealing with the compassion fatigue the best way they can, and that could be just by shutting off. And so when you always are focusing on other people and their needs, and then you're not focusing on your own self-care, this is the exhaustion that you're going to experience. And it's going to have to do with you. Like, if you can't be there emotionally for people all the time, if you give everything you have and it doesn't feel like there's ever any results, like, I think, you can all look at your bathtub and see that it's being drained pretty rapidly. And then what are you left with? And that's where, people find themselves just sort of, really giving up on what's happening. So the secondary traumatic stress is, what do you see? What is that interaction like for you with the person or the problem or whatever's happening? And then what is your reaction to that? And this is what we're seeing, and this is the struggle. The struggle is real. We're not talking to each other, I think, as much with consideration and patience and compassion. I think people are shorter. I think that, if I can't do something for someone, then they're very likely to take it out on me, regardless of whether I can or cannot do that. I think people assume that someone's not doing something for them because they won't. And I think that there are definitely factors that are just impacting overall our whole country, and how our perceptions of what other people are saying and what they think, and our tendency to sort of categorize people based off of, like, if they're good or they're bad, depending on if they agree with us, or if they're willing to work, or how they talk to other people. So just to sort of to really stress this is that if you're finding yourself having disproportionate reactions to interactions that maybe not going the way that you would like them to, or to someone speaking to you in a way that you don't like, to really take a pause and look and see, are any of these things happening? Do you feel as though you've gone into this place where things are really out of your control because of how you're responding? I just want to go back just a second. Sorry, Tracy, hold on. I just want to go back to this because I want to talk about the workplace stress, so that people feel really normal. 84% of people in our country report feeling stressed by the job. 1 million US employees miss work because of job-related stressors. The physical symptoms that come from stress: headaches, tooth pain from grinding your teeth, fatigue, upset stomach, etc. And when you look at what happens with trauma, physical symptoms, so if our stress hormones are increased, then our heart rate goes up. Chronic stress leads to hypertension. And so, like, what, that is essentially, when we talk about trauma, the outcomes from the adolescent. We're not going to go through the ACEs, but assuming like the test of saying, like, how many of these 10 traumas have you gone through, and depending on how many of them, you have increased chances for things like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, substance use. And so if you're coupling that with the stress of your job and not being able to respond in ways that are adaptive, then that, I think, even more increases the likelihood for you to experiencing these health problems. And so it's not just people or kids where the trauma is important that we recognize and help mitigate the risks for. It's also adults who have grown up with these experiences or are experiencing them, like as adults. All right. So these are the risk factors. An unresolved trauma history, which I think I'm feeling like I'm hammering on right now. High levels of empathy. So this feeling like you feel all the feels with all the people around you, and it's very overwhelming. And it's very much like, how do you shut this off? Because especially now when people are feeling so many things, they're out of their control. And are there ways you can manage your empathy without letting it become something that's, toxic to you? Socially or organizationally isolated, do you have a good team? Do you have people that work around you? Do you have someone you can go to? And if you don't, what does that mean? I think it could be really lonely. And I know part of my difficulties is that I was isolated for a long time, and I didn't know if the things I was experiencing were normal or not, because I had always had a team to be there before saying, like, pull back a little. This is what we could do different. And I think that is so important. If you haven't had a lot of experience in the field and you go through that, you go head first into it and like, you're going to do something, you're going to change the world. This is what you're going to do. I can see that, like from my own experiences and from the experiences I've seen working with students and new professionals, it can, you got to save some gas in the tank, because to have the expectation that you're going to be the person that changes the world is fantastic, but it's also often not a realistic objective or goal. Considering the systems that we work in. You're asked to do something and you're not trained to do it. That's really overwhelming. So, like you're asked to do something in your job that needs to be done to ensure someone's safety or ensure someone has something that they need, but you don't know how to do it. And then you're worried all the time about making a mistake or missing something. And that, that just compounds everything else. The dose of exposure, so, I was a child abuse investigator when I first started out working. And so I was on the immediate response, and I would just every day I had a terrible case, and every day we had like difficult things and decisions we had to make, and people angry with us and having to call the police to go out with homes. And, when I was 23, I would have thought like I was handling it pretty well. But the reality was, at 23 years old, I was probably had some pretty bad ways of dealing with it, with friends who were also CPS workers. I don't know that, I think I went into this sort of with an idea of wanting to save the world, and didn't really come to the reality or the conclusion that may not be in my wheelhouse until recently, when it just sort of all came down upon me. What type of work do you do? Do you work as a police officer, as a nurse, as a doctor, a social worker? Do you work where you have people who can't pay their bills and you're the person that has to be in front of them, helping them work through it while they're stressed out and maybe not being kind to you? Police officers right now, I'm not going to get too much into this, but again, if you're talking about stress responses and ingrained stress responses where you see something and you don't think, you just react, I really feel like that the trauma trainings can be so beneficial for anybody getting into any law enforcement job, so that they're better aware of what their preconceived beliefs are causing their responses or their reactions, or leading to things that where they're not able to think before they react. And I feel a lot of empathy for people that are in those situations, because they may not know, it may not be something that is embraced culturally within their position. Like, I don't know, like most of the police officers I know are not like going to talk about their feelings a lot. So I feel like that's sort of, if we could create a better environment and culture within police departments, that could be something that could help a lot with what we're struggling with as communities. Everybody has a high caseload and too much to work because there's, hiring freezes and there's not enough money. And, despite what we know and see is what people need, that's not always the reality of how the system divvies up resources. And then, overwhelmed with those work tasks and responsibilities that are not necessarily the things that feed our souls or help us get out of bed in the morning, but rather the things that just sort of seem to get in the way of the work you want to do. We did some of the warning signs: hypervigilance, poor boundaries, avoidance, the inability to empathize. So numbing, again, that's that sort of like, I'm just gonna 8 to 4:30. Don't ask me to do anything that's not on my task list. Addictions, chronic exhaustion, physical ailments, minimizing anger and cynicism, and feelings of professional inadequacy. So I really feel like we touched upon, I feel like I touched upon all these things already and like where they fall within the different categories. So we're going to touch on these all and how to like mitigate, like when you see that this is happening, what can you do to pull back? Symptoms: withdrawing from friends and family, feeling unexplainably irritable or angry or numb, inability to focus, blaming others, hopeless or isolated. And then this is the big one, and I put it in caps because this is guilty about not doing enough. And this is like, I don't know I ever brought work home for me because I knew how important, and I had that at least in the mind, like I'm not bringing this home. And then when I was in sort of like that isolated position where I didn't feel like I had a lot of support or a lot of guidance or a team to work with, I felt like I had to do everything. And so if you're in that same position, I'm going to guess that maybe you go home and can't stop thinking about the things that maybe you could do or you could have done or wish you could have done. And then it just starts to eat away at you that you're not doing enough. But it's, not your job to do everything. And we're going to talk about that. Difficulty sleeping, overeating, not eating enough. And then if you're worrying about work all the time at home and even in sleep, like it's time to take a breath and step back and say, this isn't your job. Like it's not your job to take this home with you. And if you think about the last time you went to someone for help, like you would probably be mortified if they were taking it home and worrying about you. You want someone who's going to be there and present and full of gas while they're working to help people or working in whatever job that they have. And if you're doing this at home all the time, I can guarantee you that you're probably coming in exhausted and also not doing the best you can to do what you can. So this is my list. And I have this on my wall, and I think about this all the time, and I have to go back to it when I am absolutely not where I need to be. And this is what is yours? What is your job? What can you do and what can't you do? What is the expectation that your agency has for you? What are the expectation your ethics have for you, or your, whatever field you're in, that the expectations are that you're doing best practice? And like, what is not your job? And this can be really difficult, especially when you feel like, you're surrounded by a sea of people with compassion fatigue that are just sort of like doing what they have to do to come to work, and they go home, and that's about like they just do what they have to do to meet their job expectations. And then you feel like, well, this family or this person or this situation needs more than that. Like, and then you feel the burden of having to do all of it. Like, there's several different reasons why that's not helpful, but it's not helpful to you. It's not helpful to the people with whom you work, because it's taking away their ability to find ways to do things for themselves. You teach a person to fish, they eat for life, you get them a fish. I don't necessarily like 100% think that is universal, but I think sometimes I wish that if I could go back, that I had taught kids more to advocate for themselves instead of thinking I had to do it for them. And I think that that's the best lesson that I can use now, instead of beating myself up for not having done it in the past. It's something I'm motivated to do moving forward. Boundaries, we're really going to get into this. So what I want to say is that what I thought boundaries was, and I'm sure this will be in a future slide, so I'm just going to say it now because I'm thinking about it, but my boundaries were, you don't tell personal stuff about yourself. You don't give people your phone numbers. You don't overshare your, like, just what's happened to you, or make any face-to-face things with the emphasis on what you're going through or your problems, or, how you perceive things. One of the first things when I worked at Elmira Correctional Facility, and one of the first things that I had to do as employee orientation was watch a video about how they don't have sex with inmates. So for years, I was like, I have awesome boundaries. Like, my boundaries are kick ass. Like, not gonna have sex with inmates. Check. Like, I don't really want to talk about my personal stuff, so I'm good with that. And like, no one's getting my phone number. I'm not taking people to my house. Like, no, that's weird. I have amazing boundaries. And then, as it turns out, I also have terrible boundaries. And we're going to talk about that more moving forward. But this is really what sunk me, was my terrible boundaries. And the trigger I have, or I don't like trigger, so I'm going to say like activation I have whenever someone mentions that I might be struggling with my boundaries, because all I can think of is like, do they think I'm having sex with inmates? Like, so it's not, even though I'm not in the prison, my mind automatically goes to that kind of boundary, and I become very defensive because I'm not doing any of those things. So we're going to talk more about what kind of boundaries I am terrible with, and how I'm trying to separate that initial feeling of like trying to explain to everybody what boundaries I'm terrible at, and not just letting it be what it is. Because again, like if people are doing those things, they're coming from their own experiences, they're coming from their own needs. And, you know, I'm trying not to judge those that are struggling with the kind of boundaries that I feel like I'm kick-ass with. What's your network? Create or find a community of trusted colleagues with whom you can share your visions, fears, hopes, and successes. There's such an importance in this, whatever it is, to find this group of people who not only are going to like help you figure things out or give you pointers, but are also going to give you a reality check. Like, you know, I am in a really good team now where we talk all the time. Like, is this yours? Is there someone else that we could be, you know, farming this out to? At what point is this person going to be helping themselves? And really working to help each other kind of come to the conclusion of like, what is ours and what is not ours, and supporting, instead of just feeling like you're on an island alone and you have to figure it all out. And so if you don't have that, you know, there's so many different community organizations. I'm sure like Lucam, Tracy, everybody here can link you up with something, so that you can feel like you have somewhere where you belong. You should be getting supervision. If you're not, go to human resources. If you don't feel like someone's supporting you, or you feel like you're being isolated, go to human resources, go to EAP, do something for yourself. Don't be embarrassed by it. Don't feel like whatever other people have this, I should be able to do it. Think about what your motivation is, how you want to feel, and how helpful it is for you to do the job you need to do if you feel as though you don't have supports in place. You know, let go of the result. Your brain is gonna mess with you a little and ruminate over these things because it's protecting you in some weird way from the perceived hurt that could come if you keep trying, or if you keep doing this, that you're going to get really hurt or burned. And so what it will, you know, like I found that my brain sometimes distracts me from what I know I need to do, because this like low level of burnout and compassion fatigue is better from like anything else that could happen if I keep going forward. So it's kind of just let go of that result, what you're hoping to find, and let the system play out and hope for the best. But, you know, don't blame yourself or take ownership if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to and you did everything you were supposed to do. And again, the supervision part is essential. It's key. Try to find good supervision. If you don't have it at work, find it outside of work. Do something you can where you have someone who can help you process and who can help you feel like you're getting the most out of the experience that you have, and that you're able to give the most that you can without going too far, without trying to think that it's all your job, or feeling as though there's a pressure to perform at a level that's unrealistic. So we're going to get into sort of more of this stuff about what can we be doing? What can we be doing to help ourselves? And this idea of self-care and good boundaries, I'm going to give a really honest interpretation of what I think it is, and how it, you know, self-care makes me really angry sometimes when people say it. Like I just, you know, that irritation and wanting to punch a wall comes out sometimes when people are like, well, have better self-care. So I'm gonna be really honest with it, and we're gonna do some polls, and I hope you're honest too about your feelings regarding what the typical checklist is for self-care, and then give some examples of the, you know, pitfalls or the roadblocks that come up when we think we're doing self-care, but really we're just like sabotaging our overall happiness. So one of the things we're looking for with empathy and boundaries is to make sure that they're balanced. So when you have trauma with observations, interactions, your history, whatever it is, and then you add the empathy of feeling everybody else is feeling related to whatever their trauma and interactions is, and then you have no boundaries related to, should I be feeling all these things? Like, is it my job to be doing everything for this person? And then the risk factors that we already went over, you know, you sort of have this compassion fatigue, which in the end, I think is probably for people who started out wanting to do good, wanting to help whomever it is that your field is like, that's the target population. I think compassion fatigue is just really sad. Like, it's just sort of like, how do you figure out a way to make it so that you don't check out, that you don't just phone it in, that you're able to keep some of that spark and to keep motivated and keep doing the best you can, to still come to work with a full gas tank, and to do the best you can without feeling overwhelmed. So change the pictures of boundaries. So this is my boundary problem, right? I hope everybody knows I've established that the other boundaries I'm also met. And this is, I'm both good and bad. I have strengths and weaknesses. And these are my glaring weaknesses. And I still struggle with them. And this is that I have always, the last 3 years, I have felt that I was responsible for whether or not kids were happy, failing, or succeeding, whether families were happy, failing, and succeeding, whether or not, like, if the services they had were enough, whether or not the people that worked in my program were happy, failing, or succeeding. I felt like all of this pressure that I had to do it. And there's only 8 hours in every day, and I was working 12 hours, right? I also felt the pressure to make sure that my agency was happy and seeing that I was successful. So I started to teach. I started to take cases at the clinic, and I was running a program, all at the same time. And I felt this pressure because I felt like I had to do it, because I didn't, sort of like, I guess, like a big ego thinking, like, if I don't do it, no one else will. And I think that came from talking to people on the phone who maybe did have burnout or compassion fatigue, and were like, whatever, like, this is all I have, I can't do anything more, and seeing that these people I work with needed so much more. And so again, this is a huge pitfall for me. Getting overly involved and attached is not only unhealthy for us, it's unhealthy for the people receiving services. And these are, like, it's so key. I think we only talk about it in terms of, like, if we're getting overly attached or involved, that it's bad for the people receiving services. But if you think about it, like, you have a life, right, outside of work, and those people need your they need your energy. You need your energy for yourself. And to be attached to someone who is receiving services from you can only lead to them feeling as though you're a person they can rely on, them feeling as though that they're an integral part of your life, and then you also feeling that need to fill that role. And so, like, when I talk to kids, I'm always, I say, I have a work cell phone, like, don't call me after 4:30, because if you call me after 4:30, I'm not going to pick up the phone. Here's a safety plan. Here are the crisis numbers. I'll even say, like, if I'm having a margarita on Friday night and you call me, I'm not answering the phone. Like, that's unprofessional. It's not my job. Like, don't call me. I don't want to be your savior. I don't want to be the person that you have to rely on, because that's not fair to you or me. Like, eventually, if I win the lottery, if I won $1 million, like, you're not going to see me here tomorrow. Like, so what can we do to help you get on your own feet and figure out a way to fill that need for yourself? And it took me a long time to get there. And I will say, I think I'm doing a pretty good job at that. And sometimes the people I work with push back, because I'm almost too, like, probably open and familiar still, like, where I feel like I want to be as authentic as possible with the people I work with. So I do a good job with building rapport with kids and families, but I think that, like, what I can work on is sort of putting in place better boundaries as to link that rapport is during the hour I see them or when I'm offering services, but does not extend to outside of that time. And so even though I don't answer my phone after 4:30, if they're calling between 8 and 4:30, I'm answering the phone or I'm responding very quickly. And I feel like that when I give people the tools or the resources for what they can do rather than reach out to me, I feel better, I feel good, and I know that they are walking away with something valuable. There's a power that comes in parts of ourselves are kept separate from our work. And what I usually say with this is that there's a power in not saying I love you back to someone who says I love you, which is very difficult for people, I think, because especially when you have a kid that tells you you love them or they love you, and, like, you feel like sort of a monster for saying, like, okay, thanks, like, and not saying it back, especially if this person has had a lot of trauma in their lives or attachment problems. So I have, like, long conversations when people at work or, not like the people I work with, but the people I'm offering help to or working with in the community, like, and the kids, the teenagers who would say, I love you, Miss Kathryn. And I would sit down and I would say, do I deserve your love? Like, am I in your life in a place where I'm someone that you want to share that love with, or is that something you can reserve to people who are in your life in more of a steady, solid way? Because I am not. Like, again, I'll bring up that if I won $1 million, I'm out. And so while I really appreciate it, and I so want to be a part of your life, and I am on your team and I'm supportive of you, like, I want you to save your love for people who deserve it, and the people who show up, and the people that have your back outside of this place where you're receiving services. And that will help that you, when you're starting relationships, when you're looking to how you want to be treated in those relationships, and if you're just offering your love freely, that's that covet that love, make sure that the person with whom you're sharing it is deserving and worthy of that love. I've never had a kid fall apart, ever. Most of the time, they just want me to stop talking. And so, like, they're able to just move forward. And then, it came to this point where they say, we respect you, Miss Kathryn. And that was like the chime when I left work at the end of the day. And I thought that was great, because I want them to respect me. I want them to know I'm someone who is in their lives for the period in which they are receiving the services that my program offered, and that I was fully in their lives and fully invested at that point with helping them get the tools that they needed to move on and be able to help themselves. Still struggle with that. I don't struggle with I don't tell kids I love them ever, but I struggle with, again, trying to maybe fill their emotional void by being overly helpful or overly involved during the time when I'm at work. And I know I'm doing it because I feel kind of queasy in my stomach. And so I have signs I know where I need to pay attention and pull back. I've said this over and over. There's not one person who is responsible to do all of the work that will change the world. And I will tell you that when I went to school in New York, and I remember I was like I came home for parade day with my friends, and the New York City bagpipers were here, and we were hanging out with them, and I was getting like so upset about like how like jaded they all were about, you think you're going to change the world now, you're not. Like, when you get to be in your 30s and 40s, you're going to give up and stop trying. You'll see that, like, for whatever reason, it's not going to work. And I would be like, if Martin Luther King didn't stand up for civil rights and he just gave up because it was hard, like, we wouldn't even be where we are. And I was just like so bright-eyed. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know what magic he had, but I am not Martin Luther King Jr. I'm not in a position or in a place in my life where I can be the voice for any big group or to do something that's going to change everything, but I can change this small part of the world where I work. I watched the Dave Chappelle show where he was saying the same thing, like, I'm not going to change the world, but I can change a little bit of it. And so my hope is that the work I do is going to impact. I know this sounds so cliche, but if I have one kid, like, I feel like, well, that's a whole maybe generation of people that then benefit from that. And not because I helped them, but because I gave them what they needed to be successful. And then, of course, the most important boundary is knowing when to say no. When you can say no, instead of saying, like, no all the time, because sometimes you have to say yes, is to know, like, if your garbage disposal is filling up, then to know that it's time, like, to take a break, walk away, do something else. Hopefully your agency supports you. And if they don't, like, there's always ways you can figure this out or what you need. And there are supports in place for you. And if you really feel like the things that you're being asked to do are unachievable or putting too much pressure on you or that are too much, advocate for yourself respectfully and do your best to let people know that, you show up, you're there. But if you keep doing everything they give you, things are going to slide. You're going to start feeling bad. People may, start to look at your job performance as reflected of someone who always could do it all and now is slipping. So just pay real close attention to how you're feeling during the day. And if you're feeling rushed or you feel like people know that they can come to you and you'll say yes, but you're saying every time you say yes, you're adding another thing that's going to keep you late that day, start saying no respectfully. Say, I wish I could say yes, like, I'm that person, but I got to go home at 4:30. So I'm going to say no today, but, always come back and maybe I can help later. If you don't have to be a jerk about it. Not that you are, I'm just saying sometimes it's like, no, I'm not doing that. And that could be off-putting because if someone needs help, like, try to help them find someone else that can help them if you have the time. If not, just, wish them the best and hopefully they can, figure things out. All right, so empathy. This, to me, is so poorly articulated in our education systems especially for social work, because it is defined as being one of the key guiding principles of how you're able to make connections with the people with whom you work. Empathy is stressed all over. It's stress. Like if you're not empathetic, you're not able to make authentic connections, and then the people are not receiving the best. They're not those connections are going to help these people be able to really buy into the skills and buy into the change that you're trying to help them make. But empathy can be soul-sucking. Empathy can be something that is crippling, and it can be something that I think very quickly will lead to compassion fatigue, especially if you're really feeling this burden of being the person that helps and being the person that is going to do whatever it takes to help someone, or if you're the person that feels like if you're not seeing a success, you're not successful. This empathy can be crippling, and this is definitely something that I have come to realize, like that I am very empathetic. And I remember one of the first, like I think everybody should go to therapy. I have no shame in the fact that I go to therapy, but one of the first things I told my therapist is like, is there a way to shut this off? Because I'm really exhausted. I don't want to feel these feelings anymore. Like I don't want to be in a room with someone who's crying and feel like crying too. Like, and so there's all these sorts of different things that are like, transference, countertransference, where you're experiencing, like you're hearing something and it resonates with you. And so it creates an emotional reaction, but it's also like this misconception that you have to do it all or nothing. Like if you're not all empathetic, then you're not doing what you need to do to be a great social worker. And I really think this plays out in other areas of life. I don't want to just stress being a social worker, but I think it's for teaching. It's for anything where you feel like you have to be able to recognize what someone's experiencing in order to help them. But where is that line of then being, overwhelmed with it? So you can empathize without internalizing, like, okay, great, how? So, I mean, I think that that's the issue at hand, is like, there isn't a framework in which we are taught about how do you empathize without internalizing. And it's just very, like, if you're naturally empathetic, it's difficult. If you're trying to be more empathetic, it's like, where's that line? How do I know if I've gone too far? And I don't know if anybody else here experiences this, but I don't believe that I feel like this should be a core component of all education systems, regardless of whatever career or field you're in, because it can be so tricky. But this woman, Kate Kenfield, she created this thing, Tea and Empathy. And so it's like a card game and there's feelings on it, and they're doing it in hospitals and with doctors. And so they're able to recognize how they're feeling and talk about it more in a way that doesn't feel like oversharing or feel like you're showing a weakness. And I recommend you going and looking at it, because I haven't ordered them yet, but I have talked to people who use them, and it seems like it's very helpful for professionals to talk about things in ways that don't feel like you're showing a weakness or you're not strong enough to do the job. Empathetic contagion is becoming overwhelmed by feelings that aren't yours, which is terrible. And leads to this, if you go back to vicarious trauma, like you're hearing this horrible story about someone who's experienced this horrible thing, and you're supposed to have empathy to make that connection. And where is the line? Because I don't know how you could not be overwhelmed if you're being empathetic to the point where you're trying to make this connection, but you don't know, again, how do I shut it off? How do I protect myself from being completely immersed in these feelings? Empathetic concern is taking in or experiencing someone's feelings is not required. So I sort of imagine it like I have, like sometimes I like literally have to do this. I'm like have a big plastic bubble around me, and so I can see what a person's feeling. I can hear what their experience is. I can recognize how that feels, but it doesn't penetrate that bubble. I can sometimes imagine standing on a balcony and looking down, not down on someone literally like that they're better or worse than them, but looking to see like what's going on there. And then you see the thing where if you get to a well and someone's down in it, and the well would represent depression or anxiety or whatever struggle they're having, and then you climb down the ladder, and then you're both in a well. And so the point of it is to, like, even though you're standing above, that you're giving them the tools they need to get out of it. But you still do need to recognize that it's happening, or else you'll be like, how the hell did you end up in this house? Well, like to ask the questions of like, well, what did you do? What happened? Because just recognize that this is a place where people find them cells, I think that that is a component of empathy. And then to be able to really give it to a place where you're able to better help them and avoid feeling overwhelmed. The focus is on engaging with curiosity about what someone else is feeling and to seek understanding of their experiences. And then I am sure people have watched this already, but I think it's worth it. So I'm gonna, it's the Brene Brown short on empathy that I just love. So I'm gonna show it to you now. Hopefully it all works out.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I want to stress in this, it's great, but also this would be, I think, more, it's important that you recognize again that identifying an emotion yourself to recognize an emotion someone else is great, but also to how to really connect and to do that, there's a point where you're going to be doing that with people in your personal life, and then what's the line for people professionally. And I think that that's just a pause to say, how much of myself am I willing to give to someone who is not in my life in a way that would allow for that? And not to say that the people aren't deserving of love, but are they just the same with the kids that I talk about, that I'm not deserving of their love? In a way, that's not something I want to share with someone who isn't, permanently in my life, or at least in my life in a way where I need to rely on them, or I know they have my back. It's not fair to the kids I work with if I'm doing that, and it's not fair to me. So just recognize that. So this SS avoidance is something I really look to help myself really with this idea of self-care, because I have found that through my journey, it can feel as though I am looking to fill the void that I have experienced through my work difficulties by things that are not necessarily in my best interest. So what I look at it is it versus self-care versus self-sabotage. And self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, particularly during periods of stress. And self-sabotage is the sabotaging, whether consciously or subconsciously, of oneself. So what does that mean? So self-sabotage disguised as self-care. We're fatter, we're more in debt. I think Brene Brown says this too. We are addicted, we have alcoholism. And then the last thing is funny for me because I feel like I have literally spent years pinning things in Pinterest that I've never gone back to, but have been an excellent time suck in my life. But the time suck distracts me from what I actually know I need to be doing to care for myself. So while Pinterest is great because I can I can distract myself from all of the difficulties and stressors in life and mindlessly scroll, there's not a purpose or a point to it really. I can get up in the morning and put my sneakers on, get set to run, because running is my number one, besides having better boundaries and recognizing the limits of empathy, which are actually the foundation for my self-care. Running is the thing that keeps me from murdering people. So my husband leaves sneakers out. Well, he used to, I don't know if he does it anymore, but it would be sort of like I'd come home and he could just see the steam and he'd be like, maybe go for a run. Like, I feel like I'm a little scared of you right now. And I think running will help our marriage and you. So I know that this is key. It's always been key to me. And when I'm really struggling, I have coworkers who'll be like, when was the last time you ran? And I'm like, just leave me alone. I Pinterest all morning, so I have my sneakers on, I pick my phone up and I'm just going to look at Pinterest for a minute. And like an hour and a half later, not only have I not run, but I'm late for work. So this is really hard for me because I am so easily sucked into the self-sabotage trap coming in the guise of self-care. I don't know how it's disguised as like, I deserve this. I have a hard job. I need this. This is what I just need to do right now. But it's not helping me overall. And I recognize that and yet still struggle with it every day. Just a couple other things would be, I love shopping. So if I feel like I've had a particularly difficult week or day, I will buy a bag. I have 5 pairs of the same sunglasses. I say this every time I'm in a training meeting and I think it's weird, but I do it. I love sunglasses. So I'll just buy them all. And then I realize I've got, 5 pairs of tortoise sunglasses. So then another thing that I really enjoy for self-care is taking vacations and traveling. So if I spend all my damn money on things I don't really need, I now have no money to go on vacation. And the temporary benefit of those superficial things, while it feels amazing, there's nothing better than for me to scroll through Poshmark and imagine all of the clothes I can get and think it's great because they're secondhand. But in reality, if you buy something secondhand every day, it's a problem. I have a problem. My name is Kathryn and I'm addicted to shopping. Also, if you feel like you deserve it, Ben & Jerry's is fair, I deserve it. I've had a hard day. Great. But then if you're on vacation and you should feel love your body, absolutely, have no body shame. But if you don't feel comfortable when you're on vacation in your self-care in a bathing suit, or you have diabetes or something else you need to be mindful of, it's not self-care. You're sabotaging your efforts. Alcoholism, I think, is key. My husband has said, he thinks teachers and social workers are the most alcoholic people he's ever met. And I know for a fact that when I started to come home and say, I need a glass of wine, that I needed to check myself. So I'm happy to say, I'm able to keep that in line, but shopping and eating and Pinteresting is not, these are my downfalls. Lately, it's been Twitter, which is just terrible. Don't do that to yourself. It's depressing and scary. All right, so assessing your self-care. What makes me angry about self-care, and we'll talk more about this, is the idea that you have to do something to take care of yourself. You have to if you feel like you have to buy something or go somewhere or spend any money on self-care, I feel like that again is a trap and can easily go into self-sabotage. I want to take yoga, so I have to spend money on yoga classes, and then I also have to go buy some cute yoga clothes. I can't just go on my sweaty girls' clothes. And so then you find yourself spending a lot of money on something that's supposed to be something that you can do to take care of your brain and help with, avoiding things like burnout and compassion fatigue. And in the meantime, you're looking at your checking account because of all the money you spent on yoga and feeling more overwhelmed. So recognizing and planning for these warning signs. So these are the things that this is going to be online, and if you want me to email it to you, I can. But increased anxiety and concern about safety, intrusive negative thoughts and images related to, this is for teachers, but it can be across the board, to whomever you're working with, the traumatic experiences, difficulty maintaining work-life boundaries, avoiding people, places, and activities that you used to find enjoyable, feeling emotionally numb and disconnected or unable to empathize, experience feelings of crowd. So we've been through all of these things. If you had these problems, then you would describe the effect on you. And then the goal is to have these self-care tips that can help you really work towards avoiding these warning signs from becoming full-on problems. And I will say that I did my best to find some self-care questions or self-care plans that weren't, like go to yoga, get a massage, but sometimes they're in there. But I don't have enough money to get a massage, but I do have enough wherewithal to have better boundaries and to have a check on my empathy and to run and to do things that don't cost anything. And I know, honestly, the boundary and the empathy thing for me is that's the most important self-care. And then, it comes to things that I want to do to make sure that I'm in a place in my life where I can feel less stress at home and less stress about money. So we're going to do a poll now, and we're going to do it after each of these. So this would be the psychological self-care, and I'm just going to ask you to read through these. And so eat healthy, regularly, exercise, obtain medical care, take time off, get massages, engage in fun, physical activity, time to be sexual with self and partner, get enough sleep, take vacation or day trips, make time away from phones and screens.
This poll is anonymous, so feel free to reply with everything that applies to what you do for yourself psychologically. And we'll share those results when I get a good 50 to 60% of people responding.
I like to dance in grocery stores and elevators, especially if I have a loved one with me, so that it is embarrassing to them and I make the other people laugh. And I think that is something I really enjoy to do. Like when you go to the grocery store, sometimes they've got some awesome music on, and I really feel like I went to Madewell a couple of weeks ago and they were playing New Kids on the Block, and you better believe I was doing the dance in the middle of Madewell to my stepdaughter's horror.
All right, I'm sharing. Can everyone see the first poll results?
Y'all are getting enough sleep. That's amazing.
I know, it's very impressive.
I think make time away from phones is my new goal. Okay, so the next one, I think. Oh, sorry. Won't let me go. Okay, there it is. All right, so emotional self-care, spend time with others. I guess you can put the poll up again. Spend time with others whose company you enjoy, stay in contact with important people in your life, give yourself affirmations, praise yourself, like and love yourself. Reread your favorite books, review favorite movie, get involved. Feel your feels, man. Like that's the best thing you can do. Like for me, just don't let it become overwhelming. Figure out how to deal with the feelings and then move on. Because if you're not, you're buying shoes and eating ice cream and shoving it all down with things that make you feel better right now, and then in the long run, just are terrible. I don't see the poll now.
It's running.
Okay.
And I will share the results in about 10 seconds, letting people get their votes in.
If the results are coming in.
Here's our results. Can you see them, Kathryn? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. We've got good supports here.
Mm-hmm. I try not to watch for the other shoe to drop, but I'm happy to see only 20% of you are doing that because it makes me feel better about myself. All right.
All right, move to our third.
Spiritual self-care. Be open to reflection. Oh, can you still see it? Be open to reflection, spend time with nature, find a spiritual connection or community, look for inspiration, hold on to optimism and hope, be aware of non-material aspects of life, try at times not to be in charge or the expert, and be open to not knowing. There is the serenity prayer I think everybody hears. So I have one that I read that part of it is, dear spirit, Horus, or dear Mother Earth, try to help me remember that I'm not always the smartest person in the room. That's helpful to me.
All right, I'll give folks another 5 seconds or so to respond, and then we'll share the results of this. There you go.
That's great. Come on.
Uh-oh, did you freeze?
Mm-hmm. Okay, workplace, professional. This is the one that makes me irritated, but it's better. This one's better. So taking a break, take time.
I didn't do this poll one. I forgot.
Oh, it's all right.
Sorry, I only
It's
caught
okay.
3 of them.
It's fine because I don't know how many people actually, I don't know, maybe people are.
Yeah, we had a good percentage, about 75%.
Yeah, identify projects or tasks that are exciting and rewarding. Like, that's the soul nourishing things that don't always have time for. I know people here check their emails and answer their work phone. It's never a good idea. Never. Nothing good happens when they're calling you at home at 8 o'clock at night. I think that's part of the waiting for the shoe to drop. Like I wanted to prepare myself for whatever was happening. And like, I didn't want to like walk in blindsided. And then I had a pretty good boss that said like, I'll call you if it's something earth shattering so that you can come in and be prepared, but otherwise like turn your damn phone off. Regular supervision and consultation, I think is again, with empathy and boundaries is so essential. All right, and I really want to touch upon the supervision and consultation because if you are a supervisor, if you are someone on this that is responsible for either professional guidance, so if you're a social work supervisor, if you're a supervisor at a business, if you are responsible for supervising teachers or other, whatever it is, if your job is to either educate or supervise people, there is a really important way to do this. And what I will say is that one of the best pieces of advice I got for giving suicide risk assessments to kids was to normalize it. And so instead of saying like, have you ever thought about wanting to die or wished you wouldn't wake up, say, when was the last time you thought that, it would be easier if you didn't wake up or you thought about dying because things were hard? Because I don't know many people that it's very taboo, but to say out loud, like, yeah, that's crossed my mind, of course. Like, I think it would be, people go to dark places when they feel overwhelmed and don't feel like they have a way out, or feel as though like things aren't going to get better. And that's important to recognize and to not make it seem like it's something that is only individual specific. So like what I would love is a supervisor that says like, when was the last time you sat in bed and you didn't want to get up, you didn't want to come to work? When was the last time, your stomach ached because you couldn't stop thinking about work? When was the last time you took your phone home and checked it? what can I do? Like, what can I do to help you not take your phone home? Like, instead of saying like, get better self-care, to take these things out and say like, all right, let's look through this. What can we do here to help make sure that we're all doing it? Instead of saying to someone they're not doing it, just put it in place as something regularly addressed so that it is something that you're doing. And you're normalizing it. You're saying like, this is essential. It's not saying whether you do or you don't. I'm not making this vague statement to say like, do better self-care. Like, you know, that is something really important to recognize as a supervisor as being essential to being authentic, to recognizing that people are struggling. It takes vulnerability and it takes, you know, really courage, because I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, I don't want to delve into this and have to hear all day about someone's personal problems. And I think that that's not necessary. You know, still maintain your boundaries. Like, if someone's really struggling and trying to dump all their stuff on you, be empathetic and kind enough to say, let's try to find you someone to talk to. Like, you know, this is important for me that I'm not a professional. Like, this isn't something I want to be responsible for, in a sense of, not that because I don't give a crap or I don't want to hear about your stuff, but because that's not the person I am in your life. The person I am in your life is to help you do the best job you can here, and also, you know, like, feel enough support to be able to recognize that I can you know, I would say, like, you know, therapy is nothing wrong with that. Like, everybody should be in therapy. I feel like, you know, so let's find you someone to talk to, but normalize that. You don't have to be another garbage disposal for other people's problems. And if you find yourself in that position, really, like, find someone to help you, find a supervisor to help you figure out a way to be empathetic and to give this clear direction, and to normalize this type of thing, but without feeling as though then that has to be your burden to bear. All right, so these are adopt specific strategies about what you would already do, would like to do, or committed to doing. So I don't know if you saw any of these things that you were like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Like, looking at it for me, I'm like, yes, the phone thing. I know I got to limit the phone thing, so I'm going to start really focusing on that. So that's really important, that hopefully you saw something on here. And if you didn't and your self game is awesome, like, great, share some tips because I need them. So yeah, we're going to do question and answering, but just for a minute, you know, like, just think about these things, and maybe in the chat, what was this process like for you? You know, where do you see yourself as being the strongest with self-care or the weakest? Like, do you recognize that, you know, maybe there's a line between self-care and self-sabotage for you that you need to be paying attention to? Anything missing from this list that you think is a self-care must? What feelings do you have when people talk about self-care to combat STS, et cetera, at all? Because again, when people talk to me about this at first, I would get really angry. Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't even know. How do I have time? Like, tell me more. Like, what is this? And like, then it felt like, oh, so is there something wrong with me? Because like, why are you telling me I have to get self-care? Like, what do you, like, you know, so it can feel really like someone saying you have to get self-care without having a conversation about how normal it is and what their self-care is, and giving a conversation about it can feel very personal, and I think it made me feel defensive. I don't know if other people feel that way, but I'm pretty open book with how I feel. So this is all stressful stuff. I'm going to share this video with you. It's great. Enjoy.
Dear Diary, the authorities have removed the pair of black pants from the couch. There is no longer any place for me to sleep. I have vomited 3 times in protest, but there is no sign that anything will change. My only other hope for rest is on the computer keyboard, which is nearby, but sadly no one is currently using it. I will wait. Dear Diary, my food dish is now only half full. It is obvious that I will soon starve to death. I have repeatedly tried to draw attention to my predicament with the authorities, but they are clearly either stupid, deaf, or just cruel. This may be my last entry. Dear Diary, it has come to my attention that the authorities have 2 hands that seem to have made it the sadistic policy only to pet me with one of them at a time. Half of love is just low, which is how I feel. My spirit is breaking. Dear Diary, I've decided to plead with the authorities to rub my belly. I think it'll do me good in my current condition. I would like to receive 2 rubs exactly. A 3rd one and I will bite the shit out of them as per protocol. Wish me luck. Dear Diary, the water dish continues to vex me. The authorities seem to taunt me with this cruel liquid that has neither smell nor distinguishing visual markings. A sad anniversary. This is the 900th day that my nose has been unintentionally wetted. Dear Diary, yesterday I put in a simple request regarding the door to the garden, but seemingly out of sheer spite, the authorities refused to hold the door open long enough for me to decide whether to go outside or inside, or outside or inside. Dear Diary, the authorities have punished me for taking a crap on the living room floor. This despite my efforts to distribute the litter evenly throughout the house. I am convinced that they are madmen, devoid of reason. Dear Diary, the squirrel was back again today. It mocks me. I will try and release my mind from this torment and groom myself for 4 hours. Dear Diary, I have been stalking an insect on the wall for the past 3 days now. All of my attempts to capture it have been thwarted. However, today, on further inspection, I found out that the insect was in fact a thumbtack. There is no logic in this place. Dear Diary, it is 3 in the morning. The authorities have closed the door to the bedroom. I can only assume that they have forgotten about me and have left me here to die. As a last resort, I will stand post for the rest of the night and sing the song of my people in hopes that they rescue me. Dear Diary, when the authorities poop, I have tried to poop in the bathtub litter box with them in a show of solidarity. I have yet to experience any gratitude. Dear Diary, my attempts to destroy the terrible plant have all been for naught. Somehow, almost as if by some evil magic, a new one has appeared in its place. I will have to start over now. Like Sisyphus, I am bound to hell.
So what I like to do is watch that video when I'm having a particularly difficult day. I have other ones. There's a Morgan Freeman one, which is great. And then there's anything like, I mean, there's other ones, but something I know that when I watch it, it's gonna lighten my mood a little if I don't have much time to do anything else. And then if I'm having really difficult conversations with kids, their families, or coworkers, I might afterwards like even show them that so that they can leave feeling a little lighter without making it seem like I'm minimizing whatever the problem was, just to sort of like lighten the load a little. And so I wanted to share it with you guys because again, when I was hearing about burnout, compassion, fatigue, and self-care, I felt very overwhelmed and I felt very heavy with the idea that I hadn't been doing this and it felt like I did something wrong. And so my hope is that if anyone out there felt that maybe lighten the load a little. And so I'm bringing you to the Salty Brain, simple steps to shift perspective. So as we talked about before, we all are having ingrained stress responses based off of our experiences. And you know, when you've had the same reaction over and over, that's your reaction. But if you're feeling like that you would like to change that reaction, it does take some work. It takes some rewiring. And there's different articles about brain plasticity and how you can figure out different ways of creating new routes and new pathways. But if you think about a shortcut you've taken over and over and over again, that's the way you're predestined to go. It would be very difficult for you to go to walk around the shortcut. Or how many people here have found themselves driving to the grocery store or to see a friend or something, and then you end up home because that's the way you always go. I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing, but I will tell you it's happened to me more than once. I've been late to doctor's appointments, functions, everything, because I found myself in my driveway. So, that's our roots. Like how we react, what we do is based off of how we've always done it. And to change it takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of practice because essentially you're trying to, let the other one have some overgrowth and start a new one. And it's difficult, but it's totally possible. And again, I've done all of these things and I've had a lot of successes with them. And I have a new one that I've been doing, so hopefully I have time I can add it, but it's not going to be on the screen. So I read a book because I've been like preaching mindfulness to the kids, but I honestly never did it because I always, again, like looking at Pinterest or something ridiculous. And so I have devoted my efforts to this, and I use Headspace and I like it a lot. But the book Dan Harris wrote, 10% Happier, and I liked it a lot because he wasn't like a Buddha. He wasn't somebody coming from this like as a purist. He was coming as someone like who was a hot mess and needed to figure out a way to deal with things differently. And I just recognize that because I, in my life, have been a hot mess too. So I think everyone at some point is, and it's just a matter of what you want to do about that, or if you're continuing on your sort of path that you've been on because it's difficult to do something different. And so obviously mindfulness, meditation and mindfulness is like the number one thing people can use to help reshape the way they think about things and help create new neural pathways. People that do it routinely and as part of just a regular practice instead of only when they're upset have found, like that there's significant changes in how they manage themselves and how they respond or react when they're in the middle of a stressful situation or under any kind of stress. But the running commentary forever has been that my brain is kind of an asshole. And I think that's listed, the like field of consciousness, since I can remember, is that my brain is kind of an asshole. So that's kind of, the brain is left out of this. But I would say that it's training sometimes. And then when I read that, I was like, oh, kindred spirit, mine too. So what picture your brain is drawing is the picture where it believes that it is helping you to at least maintain your low grade level of hot messedness or whatever. So, I know I need to get off Pinterest and run, right? Because running prevents me from murdering people. But also, for some reason, my brain will just be like, no, you're good. Just because what, like whatever. So it's not like in my best interest, but for whatever reason, and I haven't figured it out, like it just takes control over my best interest. And I think it's in part because like, what if running doesn't work? Or maybe, like you run and you still murder someone, and then what? Then you've got double the pain because our brains want to protect us from anything that's bad, real or perceived. We talk about it with kids all the time, but believe that it happens with adults too. So it's recognizing the connection between thoughts, feelings, and actions. A negative thought will lead to the brain sensing danger, right? There's no danger. There's no bear in this room. What is this? Why am I acting like this? Because again, your amygdala is assessing your environment. And if you have a negative thought that's in your environment, it wants to protect you from that. And it leads to the fight, flight, freeze response. And so you stop using your prefrontal cortex, which has all the good information in it. Like, I know what's right from wrong. I know what my goals are. I know that this isn't helpful. And you're just responding from what is my immediate need? I need that. I need the ice cream. I need the wine. I need the Pinterest. I need the Poshmark purchases, because if I don't have it, then I'm not going to feel better. And so again, that disconnection, and I'm not minimizing this because there's actually obviously real serious problems that occur when your fight, flight, freeze response is initiated based off of a perception and not reality. But for the purpose of our training, I'm not trying to go too heavy, and just to say that this is happening to you even when, it seems like you're not aware of it. It's happening automatically. So how do you respond versus react? So relax the body, release the thinking. And the mindful breathing is using the out breath to release tension in your body, as well as any negative thinking. Imagine negative thoughts leaving your body with the out breath. So, one of the mugs my mother got me recently was breathe in the good shit, release the bad shit. So you just try to really focus on what are you trying to rid yourself of in that moment. Name a positive. So you're safe, your body is working okay in this moment, you have some friends you can count on, you have a job, and you haven't murdered anyone yet, right? So that's the goal for me, not for you. I'm sure there's other goals out there. Close your eyes while you're breathing deeply. Imagine the details of your favorite place. So I imagine myself in this condo, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where I am sitting on it. I can smell the ocean. I can smell French fries. It's hot. The sun is on my face. And I just close my eyes and think about it, and it makes me feel really at peace. Really that helps. If you picture yourself sitting behind a waterfall and imagine that everything outside of the waterfall is not for you, it's just right where you are, and the water is there, and it's stopping from having you to really have to fully take on whatever the stressor is. Take a tour of an old familiar place that has good memories attached. I'll often remember my grandmother's house and going and opening the door and what the smell was, and walking up the stairs and opening the other door and then going in and seeing where the couch was and the TV and what color the walls were. And I just take time to really go over all the details I can remember. And I'd say 7 times out of 10, I've stopped ruminating over whatever it is that is causing me to feel angst or upset or worry. If you can't dance it out at the grocery store and in the elevator or wherever it is that you are in a place where you may be embarrassed or embarrass other people, which I still strongly encourage you trying, write it out. So what is it that you can write about that will help you refocus and pay attention to what your goals are or what you're trying to achieve. And so so this is what I've been doing lately. And it's something I've done with the kids, which I always find like I'm giving all this advice. So I decided I was going to start using it. It's ironic. My therapist is so happy. No, so I do this. So I go over all the details of something bad that happened that I can't stop thinking about. And then I start like, at first I feel really good. Like I'm going over it and I feel pissed off and I'm happy because it makes me feel like I'm in control. And I think like, what an injustice. This is terrible. But then it starts to like go into like this crippling, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Like, why did this happen? And then I start getting really upset. So while the initial hit of going over the problem makes me feel good, it always ends in disaster. So I found myself going back and going over all the details. So I was wearing a pink skirt, my hair was in braids, I was wearing a Harry Potter t-shirt. I went into the room, you know, all these details. Is what happened okay? No. Did I do everything I could about it? Yes. Is me going back in time and thinking about this over and over helpful? No. Is it changing anything? No. Can I go back and change what skirt I was wearing, what shirt I was wearing, how my hair was done? No. And then if I just keep going over that over and over and over again, instead of giving in to my initial desire to like savor that anger and the injustice of it, then I prevent myself from going into like the details, the feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, which always happens. I don't know why I still give into it, but I don't. Like really, honestly, that has been so helpful for me. So just thinking back, is there anything I can do? No. Does that suck? Yes. But have I done everything I can about it? Yes. Like, and then to like go forward from that, knowing that you've learned something and that, you know, I'm never going to sit here and say like, oh, I'm so glad I went through all the things I went through because I learned something. Like, no, I wish I had never gone through this stuff. But at the same time, if I had to, I'm going to figure something good from it. Be as specific as possible while you're writing. Like, so what exactly are you grateful for versus generalization? And that's particularly important, I think, for us because like to feel like I'm so grateful that I have heat. I'm so grateful that I have water. Medicine is better than like, you know, I'm grateful for the life I have. You know, and there's pitfalls to this, but I think in general, this is really great. In detail about the gratitude you have for one person or a thing. So I have water that's both hot and cold. I have a refrigerator that's full of food. I have electricity, so I can, you know, veg out. I have like all of these things that I know that I'm grateful for. Here's the thing, that's that if you try to write a list every day, you're going to get really sick of it quick, right? And for me, it would be like, oh my God, I have all these things and no one else has any of this stuff, or people are struggling. And I'm so like, why do I have these things? And so then it was just another like pitfall. And then one time I wrote about after watching this movie that I was grateful I wasn't Tanya Harding. So, you know, like it was time for me to pull back and start other things because it seemed as though like my gratitude list was getting a little off the point, and I was starting to think like this is a drag. Try subtraction, not just addition. What would your life be like without these people, places, and things? Try writing a positive with every negative, which kind of ticks me off a little, but I agree with it. Like, yeah, I wish I hadn't had the negative, but if I had to have it, I'm going to figure something out that was positive. Thinking of a time when anticipation anxiety was worse than what happened, which is 99% of the time when I've had like doomsday predictions, everything that's bad that has happened that I worried about, I got through it. Like, all right, here I am still standing. And I'd like to think that I'm better off than I was. I can't stress enough to you. I do not want the bad stuff to have happened. I'm not that person. But if it's going to have to happen, I don't want to waste a lot of time worrying about it because it's never as bad as I think. And I think if you're being honest with yourself, that's true. Trying to get kids to admit that, though, is like beating your head against a wall. Okay, try not to take for granted the gifts and good stuff in your life, and try not to make yourself feel bad about it either, because you work hard, you get a paycheck. Like, yes, there's stuff that people, I think, probably on this whatever this program is or this training that, you know, other people don't have. Yes, but don't beat yourself up for it. Enjoy it, because then you're just sapping yourself of the energy that you need to do good. So see things as gifts. You know, it's easy to fall into that pit and lose the ladder to get out of it. And if you take time to remember the good, it can improve perspective on bad days. So these are my dogs, Olive and Obi, and they're in general terrible, but they're so good sometimes too. And so like when I try to really get them at their best and really pull it in and feel that, how lucky and grateful I feel that I have them in my life. And just really, to not think that they are also disgusting and smelly and bark at everything, which I'm so proud of them today because I'm home and they have not barked once, and I just jinxed it, but we don't have that much time left. So hopefully savor surprises. So there's things that are going to be unexpected or surprising, and use these to have these stronger levels of gratitude. Like, recognize it. Don't say like, well, this is, I guess, one good thing that happened today. Like, yeah, awesome, this is great. Like, I'm so happy that this is happening. Revise if you repeat. So writing about the same people and things is okay, but try to zero in a different aspect and detail. Write regularly. This is the key. Write regularly. Imagine these scenarios of being behind the waterfall, your favorite place, or the details of a happy memory or place. Do it all the time, because then when you need it, you're better able to access it. The biggest mistake people make is that they only try to do these things when they're upset. By then, your amygdala is detached from your prefrontal cortex, and it is so difficult to get that benefit. The benefit comes from the repeat. It comes from the regularity of doing it and the practicing of it. And don't overdo this with the writing, because I think that is something that we really have to, that can be really I've been writing all day and I have to write more. That's so there's other things that you can do instead of that, but try to do something every day when you're not upset so that you can really practice that. Linger on the feelings you have after you focus on the good. Think about feeling I try to remember it's having terrible dreams and thinking, oh my God, please let this be a dream. Please let this be a dream. And when I wake up, it's a dream. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God it was just a dream. And that feeling of being so relieved and happy that that didn't happen in reality. I try to capture that sometimes when I feel like things are really tough. It's not a bad dream, but it's not going to be ruinous. Tell yourself that just because your brain thinks it's true does not make it true. Our feelings are gauges based off of our experiences. And so I will say I have had a very difficult time sometimes when I'm upset, and especially in the last 2 years, if I've had a problem with someone misinterpreting everything they do as a direct attack or as something that they're not actually saying. And so I have found someone who I can then read an email to or be like, this is what happened. And I trust them to say yes, that happened. That's not good. And I trust them to say this seriously, this is let's try to get through this and try to recognize that this may not be the reality. Your brain may be telling you a lie because that's how you see the situation of that person. Emphasize compassion, not relentless positivity. I really feel like it is a false narrative that we can always be happy. That's weird. I don't know anybody. I think it's if you're just saying everything is great and smiling all the time, I think you've got some dark stuff inside of you that you're not dealing with. I feel like people that are able to show that makes them mad, or that's stupid, or feeling frustrated, or saying you know what, I was really depressed, or I feel that this was difficult, or even this isn't easy for me to come out and talk about all these things I've experienced, but for me, it's saying enough is enough of just saying there is one way to be, or this is the way you should be, because it's unrealistic. And honestly, the proverbial shit will always hit the fan. And this is my quote. It's better to have an umbrella on hand than get covered from head to toe. And that's how I feel about all of these things and these tips and tools. It is not to say my goal is to be happy all the time. My goal is to feel the feels and then move on. And what went right today? This is upside down, but sometimes it's just that I didn't eat all of the Sour Patch Kids, right? That there was Whoppers left in the bag. And then that's something, right? Or today I got up and I walked the dogs. I may have spent the rest of the day on Pinterest, but tomorrow I'm gonna try again. And this is so good for me to do, is to what went right today? What did I do right today? And then sometimes it motivates me to actually do more because I want to have a bigger list to write about. And sometimes it just makes me feel better because I can see at least I washed a dish, whatever. I took a shower, good for me. And especially when you're in quarantine, I think it could be really easy to forget, what did I do today? What is going on? And just to pay attention to that. Because I think, we've got tough days ahead. And this is all difficult. So, I think everybody's going to have a little more time. So there's no excuses for not doing any of these things. I'm just kidding. You have to find what works for you and what is going to be something that is worthwhile, that is, you feel like you saw it here, you feel like it will work for you, and that you're going to try to do it, not just when you're upset, but try to, create a new neural pathway so that your responses are better and you're not reacting based off of your experiences. Oh, and then one other thing I want to say to all of you out there, don't tell people to get over it. If you're supporting someone else in their journey and they're you're in a support system or a group, try not to tell people to get over it. Watch what happens if you tell me to get over it. I'm going to lose my mind. Yes, do I need to get over it? 100%. But I don't want to be the get over it and someone else is getting through it story. And so I really feel there's other ways of addressing if someone's too much over the side of depression or anger or whatever, and you don't know what to do. You feel oh my God, you feel helpless. I can't do anything about this. And so the easiest thing to do is just be get over it. And that's our own defense mechanism, but it's not helpful. So really try to focus on that. If you're part of someone's support system or you are within a support system, how powerless that makes people feel. I don't know how to get over it, right? So how can we get through it? What is it that person needs? And you don't have to be the person to give it, but you certainly can support them as they look to find a way to help them get through it. Okay, so I think that's it. Should I stop sharing now? What do I do?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kathryn. That was a wonderful, real, reflective exploration and presentation. So thank you so much for providing everyone the opportunity to share that with you. We've had some really nice reflections and connections in the chat box. We do have a few minutes left to take some questions. People do have the ability to unmute right now if they want to ask a question or drop one in the chat box. There is also a Survey Monkey link that you'll find in the chat box. We ask that you also be sure to click on that and complete that before you leave today. But anybody have any questions for Kathryn? She answered all the self-care questions.
Does anybody have any feelings about this? When they have they ever had any problems with this is I don't like your self-care talk, or self-care is stupid.
I did appreciate some folks really connected with the protective factors information and how we can build those and have that as a visual reminder for ourselves. The recognizing between self-care and self-sabotage, that really seemed to connect with folks, and how we have to shift the culture in our workplace.
Yeah, I see that some of this is workplace and professional self-care takes an agency cultural shift as well. And I really firmly believe teachers don't hate teaching. Social workers don't hate social working. Nurses and doctors don't hate whatever, nursing and doctoring. I know these aren't words, but anyways, but they hate the places where they work. They hate it. The systems and the programs, I don't know what happens that makes it so easy to slip into an evil empire role. But, I think it would be amazing if we all remembered this, and as we grow and help shape whatever culture or organization we work in, that we remember what we needed, what could have helped. But I don't think a lot of people really know what they needed or what would help, because you're busy. It just feels like you can't talk about it because then people see you as being weak or that you can't handle it or do it all, but that's not helpful.
Absolutely, and that's part of our mission here with the Care Compass Network Trauma Informed Care team, is that we really want to help connect individuals in our community. We have this network of support with our members, but also as we're reaching out through, occasions like this and our workshops today. So please, we hope that we continue to build conversations and connections, and we'll continue to share information and look for you to share with us, and we find ways to keep promoting and build a resilient community. Lots of great feedback in the chat box. Thank you all so much. And we really appreciate your time today, and hopefully you're going to take advantage of some of the other presentations we have on behalf of Care Compass Network. Thank you so much for joining. Please be sure to give us some feedback in the survey. And if nobody else has any questions, we'll hopefully see you soon. Look out for the email with the link to this information, okay? You can watch it again and use the resources in your workplaces and your personal life as well. Thank you, Kathryn, so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kathryn.
Have a great day, you guys.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Kathryn.